Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Cindie Chavez here. Today is Wednesday, September the 5th, 2018, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, your second daily dose of happy for the day. And Cindie's still getting used to me saying your second daily dose of happy for the day because she's not used to doing the afternoon podcast, but that's okay. I'm glad we're giving you something new to get used to. And I think you're enjoying it, which is good.
I am enjoying it. I am. And it's always funny, like different things I have to take care of, different things. And then it's just a different experience. Like maybe, unfortunately, I don't think it picks up on the mic too much. But when I'm in here, I'm on a different time zone than you are. So when we do the morning show, it's really early for me.
Right.
I'm in here getting ready at 6:30 a.m. And then it's very, very quiet. And now it's the afternoon. And I live on a place in the city that my office is on the corner of a very busy north-south thruway. So it's like all this traffic rumbling by, and I'm always thinking, oh, it feels so weird to be doing the podcast with all this stuff going, like energy around me, because usually it's like really quiet. And so I think it's all a good thing, though. It's just a different feeling, but
it is a good thing. And I just love the fact that it's one more time to do a podcast for me. I mean, we were talking about stuff before we started the show today, and even the stuff that I was talking about and dealing with, not stuff I can really go into here on the air, but it just kind of reminded me how much I appreciate doing this podcast. I mean, it's just so much fun. It really jazzes me up. And
well, you know what I noticed? And I mean, I just noticed this. It's interesting that this morning, it was really funny. We wrapped up the podcast this morning, and this is just the second month, I guess, that I've been doing 2 shows on Wednesdays.
Right.
And so when we wrapped up, you said to me, like, we were saying goodbye, and you said, okay, like, I said, see you this afternoon. You were like, see you in 7 hours. And I was like, wow, is it really like that far away? And what I thought about later was that doing the podcast in the morning, the 2 morning podcasts I do, those are my early mornings. Like, I don't come into my office that early on other mornings.
Right.
And so having it be like 7 hours away, it seemed like, oh my goodness, that's like way out there. And yet the day goes by so fast. And I think part of the reason why my day goes by quickly is because there's such a great vibe in the morning podcast that I just go into the day ready for anything and feeling like I can, with that impression, a very present impression of I can create anything I want. Right?
Yeah. Well, that's what's so fun.
Not like a memory or one of those things where we have the head knowledge, but no, it's just a very real sense of anything I want. That will make your day, so much better. And when your day is feeling great, it flies by, right? But time flies when we're having fun. So
it really does. Yeah. And in fact, one of the impetuses that led to that conversation we had before the show was a conversation I had with somebody where there was like a disagreement about the nature of content. And I was trying to explain to this person just how hungry our listeners are for content. I mean, that's why we've been expanding the number of episodes compared to, say, a year ago that we do. A year ago, it was like 1 episode a week. Now we're doing 11. And it's because people were hungry for it, and they ate it right up. As soon as we started putting it out, they were just listening to all of them, or most of them anyway, and it showed up in the numbers. So clearly, people wanted the content, and I think one of the reasons we love content is because we love. Well, first of all, we love to be entertained. Good content is entertaining. It's fun to listen to. It's fun to think about it, and hopefully there's also some humor involved, and there's also, the interplay between 2 or more people, especially if there's a call-in guest or a listener calling in. But when you combine all those factors together, you get great content. And that content is just so attractive. Law of attraction, the one thing that people were trying to attract was content, and we're giving it to them. And the best part is it's fun. We get to have fun giving it to them. And I just think about that every single day, especially after today's conversation, but every day. I mean, look what we've been doing lately. Just what you and I have been doing, not counting what the other co-hosts have been doing. We've been doing wealthy people. We've been doing like little biographies. Like this morning, we were talking about Mr. Rogers, Fred Rogers. And earlier this week, we were talking about, let's see, who did we do yesterday? We did Oprah Winfrey yesterday. And then last week,
Winfrey and Joe Rowling.
Joe
and
Rowling last week. Yeah.
yeah, it's been a lot of fun
And
getting to know these people a little bit better. I mean, it's been fun for me. I think that's another thing that's really great about our particular podcast, loatoday.net, is that we have a lot of different co-hosts, so we have a pretty wide diversity in
yes.
perspective and background and opinion and all of that. And I think that makes life more interesting to hear a lot of different ideas and different thoughts. And that was one of the things that we talked about this morning with Mr. Rogers, is that
Right.
he got into he wanted to get into TV because he said, I disliked it so
Mm.
that I wanted to, and I thought, wow, if we could all think about everything that way, like, talk about being the change that you want to see in the world, right? He disliked
Well,
the
it's not just that he
programming that was
disliked.
out
He also had something that he liked. It was something that
there.
he wanted to do instead, and what he wanted to do instead was so different from everything else
That's
that
what
was
I'm
on
saying.
television.
If our natural inclination when we disliked something was to automatically say, what would be better, right? Because
Yeah,
that's law of attraction at its
exactly.
best right there, is when our response is, what would be better? How could I make this better? What could I do differently that would be better than this? Instead of just complaining about what we don't like. Like, I don't think of Mr. Rogers as a complainer,
No, not really.
right? Even though he talks about some hard things and he has some definite opinions, he always did everything in such a kind way. And so
hmm
I'm thinking about that idea that he said, "Oh, I got into TV because I did." Those were his words. I disliked it so,
hmm
and I thought, huh. So his automatic response was, "I'm gonna make this better," and
Right.
that's what we talk about with the pivot.
In fact, we didn't actually mention it during this morning's podcast, but Fred Rogers did one of the most positive TV shows in television history. I mean, did he ever
Yeah.
say anything that was really negative? I'm
Well,
not
I
sure.
think he was very real about, like, he did shows on divorce and why people divorce.
hmm
He did shows on loss and grief and all manner of things that we kind of sometimes in LOA circles we want to push that away. Oh no, let's not talk about that. That's not a good vibe. That's not happy. He talked about all those things, but he did it in a way that was full of love and kindness and respect for the little people that he was talking to, the children,
Well,
and
exactly.
he was so real.
Yeah,
And
I'm not suggesting
yeah,
that we shouldn't ever talk about negative emotions,
no,
but you can do it positively, and
yeah,
that's what I'm thinking. He did everything positively, even when you're talking about negative, you can still do it positively, and
yes,
he did it really well too.
I agree. And that's, I mean, I think that if we would have that response, I mean, it takes me back to the beginning of the year, this year, when we were reading through Money and the Law of Attraction, and we were learning and talking about our own experiences with pivoting.
Yeah,
Which, if you're a brand new listener, all that is it's very simple. It's when you're experiencing something you don't like, whether that's a head cold coming on or a tense relationship, at work, or not enough money, or whatever it is that you're not liking. The pivot is to suddenly remember to ask yourself, well, what would be better? What do I want?
mm.
And to start directing your thoughts and your internal conversation towards what you do want. And to me, that's sort of the core of what he did, is said, what would be better? And it's a great thing to remember.
It
Look
is.
what he created. What could we create if we always just said, wait a minute, this isn't what I want. What do I want?
Yeah. Well, that's the nature of being a deliberate creator is always asking, what is it that I want? Okay, I found something I don't want. What do I want instead? What would be better? What would feel even a little bit better? And going through life doing that, which is a very different way of living compared to the way most of us were taught growing up. I mean, certainly different from what I learned growing up. I learned, the traditional model, right? You work hard and you work long hours and you do a good job and you get rewarded and you end up having a family and a great retirement and all that kind of thing. And I followed that path and it was rubbish. It was just plain rubbish. It just wasn't true,
Well, I mean, we've talked about this a lot because that's so many people's story
right?
of hearing that same advice is that, oh my goodness, I saw the best thing the other day on one of the social medias. A woman said that her little 5-year-old, I think 4 or 5 years old, maybe 4, said she wanted to be an astronaut.
Hmm.
And her mom said to her, well, you have to work hard in school and get into college, and you have to be able to pass a certain level of fitness exam, and you have to make sure and have your studies be around science and math, and her little girl, the 4-year-old, said, that's only 4 things.
I love that. That's great.
And so her mom said she's sort of like a nonchalant motivational speaker. She's like,
Yeah, right.
and so somebody that like had posted it said that they had been they showed it to their whole class, and that whenever their class got worried about finals or so many things or a heavy schedule, they would look at each other and say, that's only X things. Right? I was like, out of the mouths of babes.
Right.
Yeah. So many of us were taught that we don't get anything of value unless we work hard.
The beauty too is that we've discovered and learned about the law of attraction and deliberate creation. And even though I discovered it fairly late in my life, the good news is I discovered it. And in the process of applying it, I have been able to take what was a really frustrating life story and begin the process of turning it around. And I've made significant progress in terms of turning it around. So I know that the new story works. But how great it is that even though we don't have necessarily the background that we'd hoped for, we weren't taught the right thing, we weren't trained the right way, we're alive. We woke up this morning. That means there's still time to turn things around. Because we could just as easily look at it the other way, right? We could look at it like, well, geez, I just wasted all those years, and I'm so frustrated. Well, how could they have taught me that stuff? That was just, it was so counterproductive. They just ruined my life, and now here I am stuck. Well, that's the story we could be telling. In fact, it was the story I was telling, now that I think about it.
Now, last week I sent an email to my people, and I got so many replies of thanks, and the gist of it was that, I really was wanting to send a message that you can do it.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever it is that you really desiring to do, you can do it, because if you couldn't, you wouldn't have that desire. Like, if the desire's there and you're being pulled towards a certain thing, you can do it. But the part that people responded to was that I said, look, Grandma Moses was, I think she was 87 when she painted her first painting. And by the time she died, she had painted 1,500 works.
Wow.
And she'd also written an autobiography in that time and been given a slew of awards. And I said, Julia Childs, the famous chef, she didn't write a cookbook till she was 39. And she didn't have a TV show till she was 51.
Right.
And Laura Ingalls Wilder, who wrote the famous Little House books. I think she was 65 when she wrote the first one.
Really? I didn't know she was that old. Okay.
And so it's like, and I had all these stories, and people responded with like, I even had people, younger people, like, one person that responded, it was in their early 30s, that said, this is helping so much right now. So that sense of time getting away from us, or it being too late to do something we've dreamed of, or all of that, that actually happens to most of us at one time or another. And we might even be quite young when we have those thoughts, right? And it's like, it's never too late.
No.
Just start moving forward. That's what I liked about this morning. Part of our conversation that kind of stuck with me all day was the idea of small actions, little things, doing small things consistently. We were talking about that idea that people always talk about with time travel.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Any little thing we change in the past is going to have this enormous, result for the present. And what if it's a bad result? But what about any little thing we do in the present having an enormous result in the future? It works the same way. So
yeah, somehow we miss that one. We skip that part when we talk about time travel for some reason. I'm not sure why, but we do.
Well, small actions and doing them consistently, I think that's one of the most important, tools to remember when we're talking about deliberate creation.
Well, plus the big thing that I learned, the biggest thing I would say that I learned as I was learning this whole law of attraction philosophy or realm or whatever you want to call it, is the importance of what is often called getting into alignment. Well, first thing I had to do is learn what getting into alignment meant, because I heard that phrase. I said, what the bleep are you talking about? But once I found out that it meant just getting into a better feeling place and, feeling good about life and finding all the good things out about life and saying, well, never mind the dark cloud, I'm going to look at the silver lining and all that kind of thing. I said, oh, okay, well, at least I can handle that. But what was the message again? Oh, the message is do that first. Get into the
Yes.
alignment first and then take your actions. And I never made this connection early on. I've only recently made it. We talk about inspired action, taking action versus taking inspired action. And I realized what the difference is. The difference is really simple. Action is what you take when you're not in alignment. Inspired action is when you take when you are in alignment.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly it. And inspired action, whatever it is, it's born out of being in alignment.
Right.
And that's the thing is, and you know what, even as a seasoned law of attraction, practicer,
Practicer.
one of the things that I even catch myself doing is I'll be inspired towards some idea, some goal, something I want to create or produce or some outcome. And I'll be excited about it. And then I'll decide that, okay, how do I do this? What should be the first step? And I start making a plan. And then somewhere along the line, I decide on some action. And at that point, it may be a should. Well, I guess I should do this, And right there, I've lost the inspired part of the action part.
Mm.
And when I start recognizing, okay, I've got this long list of things now that I need to do to make this thing happen. When I recognize that maybe part of it's not feeling all that great, I don't feel like doing these things on the list, or the part I don't like, I recognize, somewhere along the line. And that's when it's like, I need to get into alignment. Well, if I would have been in alignment before I made the to-do list, it would have looked different. And
It's true.
sometimes the actions that come out of alignment don't have anything to do or don't seem to be directly connected to the outcome we're looking for.
Mm.
Like I remember one time I had this idea and and it had to do with my business. And then the more I thought about it, the more I wanted to just make a painting. And I kept telling myself, wait, but you're supposed to be working on this other thing. And finally, I just decided that this idea for this painting that kept coming into my mind, that if I didn't do it, it just was going to nag me forever. And it's really, and I thought to myself, it really is what I want to do right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I gave myself like 3 hours to go start a painting, at least try to get it out of my system. And so I did. I was like, okay, from now until, 4:00 or whatever, I'm just going to spend time in here painting. And I did. And when I came back, I had a business transaction happened. And then that night I had someone else reach out to me about the business I was talking about. And then the next morning, again, I thought, oh my goodness, see, that was inspired action. It had nothing to do with the business that I was speaking of.
Yeah. Well, I love the fact that they were inspired by the fact that you had to get it out of your system.
Well, it's like sometimes we really want to do certain things, and we need to pay attention to that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Instead of talking ourselves out of it because, no, there's this hard work that needs to be done. But we get programmed when we're younger that hard work is the way to get there.
Right. No, it's true. It's true. And the fact is, how often do we run into something where, like, I want to do some painting. Okay, that was what you basically said. I want to do some painting. And yet we talk ourselves out of doing it before we even get started, regardless of whether we get into alignment.
I was trying. I mean, I was trying to talk myself out of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, this is just, you can put this aside. You need to be working on this. This is more important, blah, blah, blah. And I'm glad that my desire kept nagging.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I was like, okay. I'm going to make a painting. Or whatever. It may be, I'm going to go take a walk or a bike ride or go walk the dog, or, it may actually be, okay, I need to make that list and get down to business. You'll know by how it feels. It's like we always say, look, it either feels better or it doesn't. It either feels good or it doesn't.
Or at least it feels a little better. It doesn't have to feel great. It just has to feel a little bit better, right? Because that's the path that we try to follow as deliberate practitioners. We try to look at all times for what would feel a little bit better. Would this action feel better? Would drinking this feel better? Would eating that feel better? Would reading that feel better? Would going outside feel better?
Right, and that can be tricky when we're at the bottom of that scale, because I tell you, when you're suffering, and maybe let's say you're suffering in silence. Maybe you're really down in the dumps, and maybe you're upset about something and it's just simmering and you're just seething about it, and none of that's a good feeling.
It's true. In fact,
and maybe part of that is that you don't want to speak up because you're anxious about it, and it feels scary to say something, and it just feels like it's going to be a conflict. But sometimes speaking up feels a little better than keeping quiet.
It's funny too, because what you're talking about there, that what you're describing about all the different arguments that we make against taking some kind of step, right. They're all the arguments that lead to us feeling stuck. And then we wonder how we got stuck.
You're not kidding.
It's like we skipped all that, right? Sure, we went through all that thought process, and then we just kind of dismissed it. Like, well, that can't be what made me stuck, right? But it did.
You're right. Yeah, we keep ourselves stuck. And then how many times have you said or heard somebody say or witnessed somebody say, oh, I'm really glad that I spoke up about that. I feel better now.
Right.
And we're still nowhere near like the top of the emotional scale where we feel full of joy and happiness.
No, we climbed one step and we're like one step higher than we were. That's about it.
But see, but that's how you do it. That's how you go up a ladder. That's how you go up a flight of stairs, one step at a time.
What, you mean you don't just like glide right up the ladder? I mean,
you might.
I don't know if I could. Even with my long legs, I'm not sure I could do that. I could possibly go up 2 steps at a time. That's about it.
When you're 5 feet tall, you go up one step at a time.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I think that's important to remember, though, is that, it's incremental. Even that classic, Zen saying about a journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. It's like one day at a time, one step at a time, one little move up the emotional ladder at a time. Before you know it, you'll be hanging out at the top more often than not, instead of hanging out at the bottom.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I like the idea of small steps and consistency.
And it's hard. I mean, especially when you're at that low end of the ladder, when you're at the bottom of the ladder, and you're knowing you're only taking one step at a time, and you see a whole lot of steps above you, and you're not sure how long it's going to take you to get up there. That can kind of scare you a bit. That can be pretty daunting, and it can be pretty intimidating, and it can make you feel like it's going to go on forever. But the funny thing is, when you start taking the steps, that feeling goes away, especially if you're in alignment. If you're getting yourself in that feel-good place and you take a step or two, it feels really good. So why is that? I mean, there's something about, being in a better feeling place and then taking a step and it just feels better.
Yep. It's like that saying, the better it gets, the better it gets.
The better it gets, right. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it reminds me of you and the podcast.
How so?
Well, you had the podcast and you were inspired you wanted to keep doing the podcast because you felt happy doing it.
True.
And you got inspired to expand it. And you took an action step of reaching out to, a group of people to see if there was anyone that would be wanting to come aboard and be part of it.
Right. That's true.
And I don't know how easy that was for you to do that reaching out. But I know that anytime I get and I am not, I'm not an introvert. I'm not shy. And yet when I have an idea that I need to reach out to someone, there may be a moment of hesitation of, oh, is this really the right thing or whatever? But you reached out, people responded, you reached out more people responded. It's like, it's your story, not mine. And it'd be, easier for you to tell more accurately. But to me, just from observing, it seems like the better it got, the better it got.
It did. Oh, no doubt about that. And how hard was it? It was certainly easier because of the fact that first Joel and I, and then David and I have been doing the weekly podcast together. And we were seeing nice increases in the number of people listening to the episodes. And so that gave me the encouragement. I mean, it was growing at such a nice pace that by the time I reached out to you and Wendy and Tom last November, it was growing at a really good pace. So that gave me some confidence. However, just because I had the confidence didn't mean I didn't have those second thoughts. So you're right, I did have them. I did kind of play it around in my mind. And ultimately, that's where getting into alignment made the difference because I knew we were getting good numbers. That helped me feel better. That was my getting into alignment step. And it wasn't a difficult step to take because all I had to do was look at the numbers and say, hey, the numbers are up. All right. And they keep going up. I like that. But I had to do it still. I still had to actually take the moment to get myself in that good feeling place. And then once I did that, it seemed easier to reach out to you guys. I had a little trepidation, but I had the feeling like, yeah, okay, I've got something here. I've got something that, say, a life coach would want. Because, I mean, I knew I wanted life coaches. Why did I want life coaches? Because life coaches know the content. Life coaches know the topic. They know it really, really well. And I wanted to have the best content out there. I knew how important, I still know how important great, great content is. And I wanted it to be fresh. I wanted it to be new. And I wanted it to be new and fresh every single time somebody tuned in. I didn't want them playing reruns all the time. That was one of the things I learned today in that conversation I told you about. I learned that the popular model is just play reruns. You know, people will listen to it over and over again as many times as they want to. And I said, well, I thought to myself, yeah, that's probably true, but is that really what they want? Because that's certainly not what my experience with a podcast has taught me. What my experience with a podcast taught me is put out more content and they eat up all the content. That doesn't sound like somebody who wants reruns to me. So that gave me confidence. That combination made it much easier for me to reach out. So when I did reach out to you guys, I was in a good place. And, I was kind of amazed too by the response, by the way, because you guys responded, all three of you responded within 24 hours, which I did not expect.
And then after we started all working together and we talked quite a bit about how important stories were, and not just us telling better stories in each of us individually in our own personal lives, but that other people's stories were very inspirational. Hearing how other people have attracted good things into their life were inspirational. And you had the idea of collecting stories and creating a book. So then you were reaching out to a whole
new audience. Yeah.
And I just looking at it on the scale, it just seems like the better it gets, the better it gets.
The better it gets.
It's applicable for anyone and for any situation where we start making sure that we're in alignment, because all of those things were done from a place of being in alignment.
They were, yes, and it makes a difference because that's where the chutzpah came from. That's where the dare came from. I was able to dare myself to do it because I was in a good feeling place. If I hadn't got myself in that place, I probably wouldn't have done it.
Well, and so how do we know if we're aligned?
It feels good. That's my measure. Do I feel good? Oh, okay. Well, then I'm aligned.
Yeah, if we're out of alignment, it doesn't feel good.
No, it doesn't.
It's pretty simple.
It's amazing how many decisions I've made in my life out of alignment without realizing the importance of it.
Oh man.
Probably the first one was when I listened to my parents and teachers say, well, you just got to work hard. Meanwhile, I'm getting more and more depressed saying, oh my God, is this what life is all about?
Well, and a lot of times we have so many beliefs that we're not aware of, right? That start informing our choices and decisions. Two of them that come to mind. One was another person's and one was mine. One of them was that somebody said to me, you know how you hear people say, marriage is a lot of work. Relationships take a lot of work. Like hard work. There's that hard work thing again.
Mm. And
I had someone say to me, well, relationships take a lot of work and I'm ready to do the work. And I recognize that when you're in even the best relationship, you're going to have a lot more bad days than good days. But and I said, whoa, let's stop right there. And it was interesting because I said, that's not my experience. And they said, what? And I said, well, in my relationship, there are hundreds and hundreds of more good days than there are bad days. And when we have a bad day, we get through it together as a team. So I don't have that experience of just expecting more bad days than good days in a relationship. And this person said, really? Wow. And I realized right then, okay, this is, who knows how far back this belief goes.
Oh, yeah.
It was like the sky is blue,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like this belief of this is the way it is. And then a belief that recently came up, I saw an old essay I had written, and I was like, oh, wow. And I think it's valuable. I might even kind of re-edit it and republish it. But it was one day, you ever have that experience where you run out of everything all at once?
Okay.
Like, it's not just like you're out of, a couple staples. It's like, oh my goodness, like the refrigerator's empty, the cupboard's empty, and there's no toothpaste and there's no cleaning supplies, and we're out of paper towels, and I mean, we're out of everything. It's like, I need to go really do a major shopping trip. Well, one day I was noticing I took my bathrobe out of the dryer and I went to hang it up, and part of it ripped. And then I was folding the clothes, and I realized how many things were in the laundry that really just needed to be replaced.
Oh.
And all of a sudden, it's just one of those aha moments. I realized that 6 months earlier, I had seen this bathrobe that I really loved, and I said to myself, well, but you don't need it.
Mm.
Now that my bathrobe was ripped, I was like, now I need to replace it. And it hit me that when I was growing up, I grew up with a single mother and a sister, and I knew the older I got, the more I realized how hard she worked to take care of us. And it was like, there were a lot of times I wanted a thing, but I knew it wasn't like a necessity. So I just didn't mention it, because
Mm-hmm.
I knew that she would find a way to get it for me. And that was just more stressful for her.
Mm-hmm.
So I developed, a belief system that it wasn't really okay to have what I wanted.
Yeah.
It was okay to have what I needed.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, if I had, and my mother would have told me, like, if you need something, you need to tell me, and we'll get it. And so I thought, all these decades later, it's still affecting me that sometimes if I want something, I don't allow myself permission to want it because it's not a necessity.
Oh yeah, I went through the same thing. I know exactly what you're talking about. And when you were talking about relationships and the person that you were helping, whose perception about the nature of a relationship and how it's always trouble and so forth, that perception I think is actually a very common perception. I know it's the one that I had before I met Louise. In fact, it was my main reason that I gave most often whenever somebody asked me, "Are you going to get married?" And my answer was no, because I'd heard about all these terrible things that went on in relationships. And yet I also knew deep down I wanted to have a relationship that wasn't like that. But
Right.
I didn't know of any models. Well, that's not true. My parents were a model. Their relationship was fairly good, so I had that as a model. But even so, I mean, I just couldn't. It was part of what I was running into. I've talked about how there was like 20-year period there where I couldn't have a long-term relationship. It just none of them would work out, and I certainly had the wrong mindset. We've talked about that before. But another piece of the puzzle was this long-standing notion that there was no good way to have a happy, positive relationship with somebody, and it was reinforced by every time that I met somebody, I would find all things about that person that would tell me, nope, this is what we'd be disagreeing with. We wouldn't get along about this or about that. I'd be awfulizing. I'd be finding all the different ways to justify the idea that the relationship wouldn't work. And of course, then the relationship didn't work.
We always joke around here. We're big Jerry Seinfeld fans, and we always joke about, on one of Jerry's shows, he said, people, they're the worst. And we're always like, if something happens or something, we're like, people. One of us will say people. And we just start laughing, right? Because I think when you said that's a really common belief system, I thought about that. It's like so many people are like, oh, relationships, people, they're the worst. Like there's always, something's going to go wrong. And it's really funny to think that a lot of that stuff we hear when we're kids, and we just grow up with it sort of ingrained in us. We don't even really overthink it too much. It's just like, it's a given.
Well, it was the kind of information. I grew up in the late 60s and early 70s, and I remember the common news, of course, news is always negative anyway, and I didn't realize that. But the common news stories
Yep.
were things like the 50% divorce rate. 50% of all relationships are going to end in divorce. I said, why would anyone want to marry? Why would you want to put yourself through that? And then I'd hear about, what would happen in the divorce. The ex-husband's going to be paying out alimony and he's going to give up half his worldly goods or maybe all of his worldly goods. And I'm thinking, who would do that? That sounds insane to me. So there was just one other message that came to me saying, no, 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 don't get married. Don't do that. That's bad for you.
Well, I mean, I think we got so many messages like that. So it's not a wonder that we come into law of attraction and, I have to say, it's not a quick trip because I think that we continue to learn and learn and learn. And like even this thing about, oh my goodness, like I sometimes am not letting myself even want something because it's not like I don't need it. I mean, I've been practicing law of attraction for a long, long time. But that was actually really cool discovering that.
Mm.
I mean, it was like, aha, I think it's a great thing. So I think that discovering all those little, hidden limiting beliefs that we have, it actually can be really powerful when we become aware of them.
It's a good question, though, that you're raising indirectly. The question you're indirectly raising is, how do you take a limiting belief when you find it and turn it into a positive? Because you're seeing all those limiting beliefs as positive, which is great. It's a great way to do it. But when we're in the process of running into them, that's usually not the first thought that comes into our mind. Usually the first thought is whatever it is that's limiting about it. And usually it's something negative and it's got a bad spin to it and it feels bad. And now all of a sudden we're focusing on this bad feeling spin thing.
Well, no, it's that, first of all, the beginning of that is taking radical responsibility for our own experience. So, in other words, whatever I'm creating in my life, that's on me. I take responsibility for it. It doesn't mean that some other person or event might come along and, cause some discomfort in my life. But however I respond to it is my responsibility.
Mm.
So when I know that, which is very, very empowering to know that I can take responsibility for my own experience. People don't make me feel bad, right? It's like anything that's going on in my life that's uncomfortable. I'm not looking for who's to blame or who's at fault or who did this to me. I'm looking for, okay, this isn't what I'm wanting. What do I want? And so when I recognize, like that day, I recognize, I remember I wanted that bathrobe like months and months ago. And the thought in my mind was, well, I don't really need it. And I put it back. Now here I am with a ripped, garment that now I'm saying, okay, I need to replace it. It was the aha moment of, oh, this is just a leftover thing. It protected me, and I was protecting my mom when I was young from more stress. And so, hey, it worked at the time, but it doesn't apply anymore.
Yes.
So it was very freeing to say, hey, our parents tell us not to talk to strangers, which is great until you're, when you're 5, it's okay. But at some point in your life, you're going to have to be able to talk to strangers.
That's right. Yeah.
Right? How do you have a job interview? How do you meet a new professor or teacher that you're learning from?
That would make a rather novel job interview experience, by the way. You go in and you sit down in front of the interviewer, and the interviewer says, hi, how are you doing today? And you answer, well, I'm sorry, I'm not allowed to talk to strangers. I mean, that would pretty much defeat the whole interview.
So, I think I don't really look at it first of all, I don't dig for limiting beliefs. That's not usually productive. But when one unearths itself and is right in front of me and I can see it, whether it's my own or with a client, that's a big moment of celebration. Because now that I'm aware of it, it doesn't limit me anymore.
That's a powerful thing. Because when you found a way not to be limited anymore, what you've really done is you found a way to feel better.
Oh, it feels great. It feels great to recognize that a certain of a certain worldview or a certain belief that I had that was limiting me, and suddenly I'm aware of it. Because really, most of our limiting beliefs, they limit us because we're not aware of them.
So that's a pretty key point right there, because what is it we're trying to do? We're trying to learn how to feel better. You just explained how to feel better.
Well, yeah, you take complete responsibility for your own feelings and emotions, and you just decide that you're going to feel better and better, even if it's just a little bit. Most of the time it is.
Well, more than that, also, when something comes along, something that you didn't really think about, but it just came to you that you had this one limiting belief, you said, "Oh, great! I found this limiting belief, and now I'm going to find my way to feel happy about, the fact that I've discovered it, and I've realized that it's actually from my past. I can leave it behind. It doesn't apply anymore." You found a way to take that situation and turn it into a positive, and that's how you did it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really powerful. So when you uncover something like that within yourself, it's not a bad thing at all.
No, no, it's not. I can see that.
No,
That's a good thing.
Yeah, it's something that can propel you to move forward and drop it. Just drop it.
So here's an interesting question for you. Do we have to wait for situations where some limiting belief, some negative thing crops up that wasn't there before? Do we have to wait for that in order to feel better?
No, definitely not. And that's why I don't dig for limiting beliefs. I mean, I think that we can just choose what our new beliefs are, right? That's kind of what most affirmations are doing. Like people say affirmations like, I'm worthy of love. I'm worthy of happiness. I'm worthy of abundance. And how does it feel when you say it? It's sort of like when you started the mirror work.
Well, honestly, it felt weird at first, but
right.
It just took a little time to get used to it. But once I had been saying it for a while, then it felt really good.
If someone asks me to say, I am worthy of great love, and when I say it, it feels uncomfortable, it's because it is bumping up against a belief system that's not in alignment with that saying.
Mm.
That's why it doesn't feel good.
Yeah, that's true.
The more I say it, the more it gets a little easier, the more comfortable it gets, the more I start agreeing with it. I am worthy of great love.
The interesting thing too is when you do that, when you go through that process, interestingly enough, you mentioned how you don't want to actually go looking for limiting beliefs. I find that when I went through the mirror exercise process and got to the point where it was no longer uncomfortable, I know the limiting beliefs must have gone away because I was feeling comfortable again, but I didn't know what they were.
Right, so, you don't have to. Yeah, exactly.
So ultimately, I ended up getting rid of a limiting belief, and I didn't have to dive into it.
Yes, exactly. You don't have to. And just like me that day with the pile of, laundry in the ripped bathrobe, I didn't go looking for it. I just sort of all of a sudden said, oh my goodness. Because I said, well, I should have bought that bathrobe. Well, I didn't really need it. Oh, and it was just, I don't know where those kind of, epiphanies come from, right? But sometimes we have them. And when we do, it's great. We can use it. But do we need to figure it out? Most of the time, no. We just need to choose what we want to believe and start believing that.
Now, it is possible we'll run into something that doesn't go away that easily. So in that circumstance, then we have to do something with it. And that might be a time to look at it. But so much easier when you don't have to do that.
But see, the thing is I still catch myself sometimes with that same belief popping up. But I'm aware of it now.
Mm.
So when it does pop up, I'm aware of it and I recognize it. And I recognize that it's not really something I need to pay attention to right now, like I did before when it was serving me.
Well, that's an interesting question right there. Is it true that limiting beliefs serve us? I mean, it kind of sounds like from what we've been talking about that early on, those limiting beliefs were important limits. And that's why we accumulated them. They actually played a role. They played an important role, but we've
I
kind
think
of outgrown the
sometimes they
role.
do. I don't think they always do. In the case where a child grows up and they're getting a certain message from their community, from their parents or from their teachers or from their siblings or their relatives or their neighbors or whoever is telling them a certain thing. And usually it's very well intended. It's
Sure.
it's something either for their own good, like
Yeah.
the belief that we shouldn't, run out into the street. It was serving us at some time.
Hmm.
And until we could use it wisely, and on the occasion we need to run in the street for whatever reason, we do it in a safe way,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah. Well, I was doing that today actually, because when I take my walk that I take every single day, there's one portion where I have to cross a major street, and there's a crosswalk and all that. But of course, you do what an adult does when you come to the crosswalk. The rule here in Connecticut, I think around the country too, is when someone's in a crosswalk, traffic is supposed to stop. Well, you don't just walk out in traffic; you actually make sure they're going to stop, and then
Correct.
you walk out in traffic. And then what I literally do once they've stopped, because I appreciate the fact that they stopped for me, I don't walk; I'll run. So there's the appropriate time to run.
Exactly. So those beliefs, can serve us at a right time, and then we don't need them anymore because we can develop our own choices in the moment, and we have the mind to figure out when we should run and when we shouldn't, and what we should look for. But
Hmm.
then there's the other beliefs that happen because of something that we hear over and over, or something we experience over and over.
Such as.
Well, such as the person that said, even good relationships have more bad days than good days.
Oh, okay.
That may have been their experience growing
Yeah.
up,
Yeah.
right?
Sure.
Maybe they were around someone who fought a lot or struggled a lot,
Hmm.
but then made up and said, well, we love each other, but relationships are hard, right? Well, okay. Or what about, we talked before about a story I heard someone speaking of where they said that they would ride that their grandfather would give them a ride to school, and they had to drive through a very wealthy neighborhood, and that the whole time the grandfather would say, oh, who would ever spend that much money on a house? And can you imagine living in a big house that big? It's ridiculous. Nobody would want to live in a house that big. And who would waste that much money on these big cars? Like, that's so silly to waste money on these big cars. That's ridiculous. Well, none of us want to be silly or ridiculous or wasteful or whatever is being tagged there. So we may grow up with a belief of, oh yeah, it's wrong for whatever reason.
Mm.
And maybe that belief never served us, but it was someone else's belief. And they were probably well intended, right? They couldn't give us a bigger house, so they were making reasons why that would be silly. Wanted us to be grateful for what we did have or whatever. So sometimes, those belief systems are actually just serving someone else or helping someone else, and they kind of get passed on to us.
It's true.
So
One
we
of
absorb
the
everything.
one of the interesting stories that Joel Elston, who does the Thursday morning podcast with me, told me one time is that with his newly adopted son, he adopted Justin earlier this year, and with Justin, he there was one point where he and Justin were out driving around. I can't remember what the occasion was. It doesn't really matter. But the point is, they were driving and they were driving past these really really big houses, and Justin said, "Whoa, wouldn't it be great to live in a house like that?" And Joel's response was, well, yeah, but on the other hand, that's a lot of rooms to clean, and I really don't want to clean all those rooms. I'm perfectly happy with our house. We got plenty of room in our house. I'm fine with that. And I'm thinking that's quite a different message from the one that he could have given. The one he could have given was, "Oh, we can't afford it," or that's only for rich people who don't care about other people, or there's a lot of things he
Exactly.
could have said. And what he simply said was the truth. Like, I just don't have a need for a house that big.
Yeah. Or what about just, I bet it would be great.
Well, yeah, yeah. Especially if you got people to clean the house for you.
Right. And I'm really happy with the house that we're in.
Hmm.
And it might be great to live in that big house. I mean, you're right, though. Those are the kind of messages that we hear, that they're attached to other messages, right?
Hmm. Oh yeah.
Like, yeah. So no, I don't think we always have to dig around to find like our childhood, you know.
Yeah, a lot of them are pretty obvious when you think about it.
Well, and if they're not, they might become obvious like that did
Mm,
with me. I mean, it'd been decades since I'd been a little girl living at home with my mom and having to worry about anything like that.
right. Yeah.
And
And
then I recognized, oh my goodness, this just popped up. So I think it's sort of like when the student is ready, the teacher appears.
this is true. That's definitely been my experience. I mean, talk about something that I didn't recognize. I didn't recognize what I talked about earlier, that I was always finding something wrong with women I was meeting every single time. This is why it's not going to work out. She's not going to love me. The relationship won't work because of this. We have different interests. I was always finding ways to say that the relationship was not going to work. Did I recognize that I was doing that? Heck no, I had no clue I was doing that. I had no idea that was a regular pattern with me. I didn't discover that pattern until I'd been married for more than 10 years. I'm serious. It took me that long to figure. I think it was actually longer than that. It was probably closer to 15 years before I finally realized, oh my God, that's what I used to do.
Well, and I think it's something that we do. We it's just another version of like arguing for our limitations,
Yeah.
right?
Oh yeah.
And I think we do that not because we want to or trying to sabotage ourselves or our success. It's because we're trying to protect ourselves. So an easy way to protect ourselves from finding a relationship is to automatically find something that's going to make it not work.
Which I did very effectively.
Well, and it's something a lot of people do.
Hmm.
And why? Well, because we're protecting ourselves from the potential of a relationship, which in our mind or in our subconscious might be the potential for a broken heart or potential for conflict or potential for something not working. And
Or potential for being one of the 50% who get divorced and you have to give up all your worldly goods to the other person. That was the little trip going on in my head.
yeah, yeah, you're like, these are all the consequences of it not working, and I can already tell you the reasons why it won't work. So
Yeah, exactly. So let's just skip to the end.
but people do it with all sorts of things, right? It's like with job searches
Oh
and
yeah.
with with all kinds of things. It's like they find reasons why, yeah, no, that's not going to work. And so sometimes we do have that aha moment of what's limiting us and why we have those arguments going on in our head, really.
Interesting
Because
too
we're good at
how those very good at it, and interesting too how those limiting beliefs show up in the most unexpected ways. Like today we live in the age of the internet and of advanced technologies, and as a result of that, you mentioned getting a job. Today you get a job by going onto a website and applying for jobs on the website. That's the way it's done. It was never done that way before. I mean, 10 years ago, that was even almost unheard of at that point. 20 years
it.
ago, it was completely unheard of.
Right.
So it's a relatively new thing, but that's how it's done today. Interestingly enough, though, another Joel story. Joel had a client who was having trouble getting work. And was not a really highly skilled guy. He was looking for low skill work. That was about all he could get. But he couldn't even get that much. And so Joel, and he was a young kid too, so inexperienced, nothing on the resume, all that kind of thing. Well, bottom line was Joel was hearing him talk about how he'd go onto the websites and he would apply for the jobs, and no one would actually ever offer him a job. And I don't remember exactly how many this kid was doing, like per day or per week or whatever, but I don't think it was a really large number anyway. But nevertheless, he was applying and not getting anywhere. And Joel said, this is a good time to think about avoiding and getting around limiting beliefs. Here's one limiting belief that we're going to try to get around, and I'm going to help you do it. And that is you have to go to a website in order to apply for a job. And the kid had absolutely no idea what he was talking about because that was not part of his experience. He's a kid. He knows the internet. That's what he grew up with. The idea the idea of going around the internet to go get a job was insane. You don't do that kind of thing. But that's what they did. And Joel actually took him to, I guess he was trying to get him work in a factory or something like that. So he took him to like, I don't remember what the stores were, but major chain stores with like a warehouse or something like that. And they knocked on the door of the warehouse, where there's absolutely no place for you to apply for anything. And they ended up talking to like, the head guy running the plant or something like that. And the guy saying, well, you have to go online to apply. And in the course of the conversation, the kid's saying, well, nobody's actually hiring me, and so on and so forth. But he had been coached by Joel to, present himself in a good way, and he was making a positive impression, such that after 3 of those visits, 2 of them offered him jobs on the spot, even though they were not empowered to offer employment to anyone.
That's so great.
Completely went around all the infrastructure, just bypassed it entirely.
Well, what I love is we often refer to that as outside the box thinking, right? But I love that he said, well, this is your limiting belief. Your limiting belief is that you have to go on the internet to find a job.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
It's one of those things that no one would really think of as a limiting belief, but if you can't see other options, that makes sense.
It does. Yeah.
It's a great story.
Yeah.
I like Joel's stories. They're always good.
I love Joel's stories. That's why I first brought him in as a co-host way back when, because, I mean, my first interview with him told me, this guy's good. This guy's really fun.
Well, and, he gets results.
He does.
Yeah.
He's had a tremendous history. And more than I can talk about in 4 minutes, which is all we got left. So instead of talking about that, I'm going to talk about, hey, if you're not yet a subscriber, please become one. You can see what kind of content we get. We come up with this really, really interesting conversation about all kinds of stuff. I mean, this morning we're talking about, the biography of Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. But it's different every single time. So please become a subscriber if you've not already done that. And it's so easy to do. On an iPhone, you just go to the podcast software that's built in and do a search on LOA Today. We pop up, boom, click the subscribe button, and you're subscribed instantly. All the podcast episodes come to you as we create them. On an Android phone, very similar. All you have to do really that's different there is go to the Play Store first, get a podcast app of some kind. There are lots of them. Download one. I like the free ones. And then open that up and click on the search mechanism and look for LOA Today and subscribe that way. Those are the 2 easiest ways to subscribe. That'll cover like 95% of the people out there. And if you are somebody who has been listening for a while, are you on the train yet? Are you joining us in terms of posting on social media? Because it's working. We are seeing increases. We're seeing more and more people finding out about us. And that's our real big goal, getting more and more people finding out about LOA Today. So please just post something anywhere on your favorite social media channel that says, hey, I was listening to LOAtoday.net. That just helps spread the message every time you do that. And if you have been doing it, thank you. Thank you for doing it. Thank you. We really appreciate it because it's paying off. We're seeing it. We're just trying to get everybody to do it because so far it has been a minority doing it, but we have a regular minority. There are people now who are doing it every time, Cindie, and it's getting very exciting. It really is. That's
great. And the other thing is that when you go subscribe, or if you're already a subscriber, if you ever find yourself listening live, we'd love for you to call in, and you can do that at loatoday.net. All the instructions are there, but we would love you to call in with your comments, with your questions. If you have a sticky situation that you'd like some law of attraction coaching or advice with, there are plenty of us that are ready and willing to have a great conversation and help you get unstuck so that you can move forward.
Absolutely. In fact, sometimes we just get calls from people who just say, I've been listening all this time and I don't really have anything that I want to talk about. I just wanted to call in.
Oh yeah, just call in and say hi too. Hey. That's always welcome.
Oh, it's so much fun. I mean,
your energy and
anytime that we get any kind of contact from listeners, and we're getting it more and more, which is really, really cool. Sometimes it's by email, sometimes it's by, Facebook or Twitter or whatever. Sometimes it's by just people calling in. Sometimes it's by chat. But whatever way we get it, it just feels good. And every time I get one of those emails, Cindie, I send them out to all the co-hosts so everybody can see it. We're like, oh, look at this. We got another one.
Yeah, and it's exciting. So say hello. Don't be shy. Reach out and give us a holler.
Now, if you are shy, or perhaps what you want to talk about is a little bit on the private side, which can definitely be the case, that's where a life coach can come in handy. And Cindie, just turns out you're a life coach. How does somebody reach out to you?
Yeah, they can reach out to me online, cindiechavez.com, CindieChavez. You can email me at cindy@cindiechavez.com or use the contact form on my website. It's pretty easy to find me on most social media platforms. And I would love to connect with you and have you say hello.
Beautiful thing. Well, Cindie, it's been a pleasure. My only sad part is I don't get to talk to you again for 6 days, but I can't wait for that.
I'll be back next week.
Oh, good. I'm so glad to hear that. We hope that you're going to join us next time as well here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.